Chapter 861, For's Dream. Upon hearing the middle-aged man's shout and seeing his warped expression, Hazel's eyes, which were filled with rage and hatred, gradually froze before melting into a confused and lost look. It wasn't only her. Mact and Rihanna, as well as Dwayne Dance, fell silent. No one spoke for a moment. Even Fors, who had concealed herself, also lost the sense of excitement she originally had, no longer having that strong sense of justice. After more than 10 seconds, Mact stopped looking at his assailant and turned his head to say to his bodyguards, "One of you stay here. Watch the scene and the suspect. Wait for the police." Having said that, he paused and said to his valet, "Get a few reporters to cover this matter." After preliminarily dealing with the matter, this House of Commons Member of Parliament surveyed the area and discovered that several passers-by were attempting to gather over to check on what was happening. He then looked at Dwayne Dance and apologized with a smile. "My apologies for putting you in such danger. I never expected the matter to develop this way. We did consider the actual situation of similar factory owners and coal suppliers, and we had provided them some assistance and interim measures. Who knew? Coming up with a bill is something, but the actual implementation is an entirely different matter. When atmospheric pollution becomes abnormally pressing and the various parties exert immense stress, it's no surprise that a cookie-cutter solution is employed." Klein sighed and said with a self-deprecating laugh, "There's no need to keep my feelings into consideration. I've been in even more dangerous situations in the past." On the surface, it appeared as though he was referring to his encounters when doing business in the southern continent's West Balam. In fact, he had recalled Megos, who was pregnant with an evil god's spawn, the terrifying meteor that had crashed down from the sky, Cynthia, who wanted to bear a child for Admiral Amirius, and the Rose School of Thought Angel and Numinous Episcopate monster who had collapsed the mountain outside Bayam. Compared to these, what had happened here was like a drizzle. He didn't even need to consider his own safety since there was Zio, Miss Magician, and Hazel. He didn't even take action besides dodging normally like any experienced adventurer would do. His focus was on whether this would result in a storm. Mact sighed and nodded. "I can tell that you're very calm. I once doubted your experiences, but now I'm convinced. All right, Dwayne, let's return home separately. Leave the rest to the police. If there's a need to take a statement, they will do it at your residence." Klein nodded and said to Mact and family, "Be safe." Mact nodded seriously and sighed once again. Backland's social season has just begun, and this happened. Cherish the peace we have now. Backland's social season is marked by the return of the House of Lords members of Parliament. It seems to have begun since last weekend. And this week, 2 cases have happened consecutively: the harm dealt to Baron Sindras and the assault on Member of Parliament Mact. As he thought, Klein didn't stay put. He brought Richardson, who clearly looked a little shaken, and walked towards his carriage. When he got into it, he watched the scenery fly backward as he sighed and half-closed his eyes. He was presently unable to determine if the assault hadn't involved beyonder powers, as everything that had happened could be done by ordinary people. As for the middle-aged man, he had sufficient reason to do so. This didn't need deliberate fabricating, as Klein believed that in Backland, at present, there were more than one former factory owner or employer that had lost their livelihood because of similar developments. The only thing that felt questionable was that Mact was the target. Although the House of Commons were the supporters, advocates of the environmental measures, often making relevant speeches and are interviewed by the papers, he wasn't the most obvious target during the passing of the bill. In comparison, there was a higher chance that members of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council were picked as targets for revenge. Klein leaned on the carriage wall as he slowly opened his eyes, seeing that it was already dark and cloudy with rain already pattering down. Once again, he realized how the maelstrom hidden beneath the seemingly calm Backland surface was intensifying. Reining in his thoughts, Klein raised his left palm and tapped his pocket. In it was what he believed to be Frank Lee's reply and some unknown mushrooms. Klein really yearned to return home to head above the gray fog and use the newly received mushrooms to communicate with creeping hunger, doing so to regain the use of the sealed artifact. With the storm already brewing, He believed that there was a need for him to quickly be returned back to his optimal combat strength. And in this aspect, creeping hunger was essential. Unfortunately, he had 2 Beyonder bodyguards following him, so it was best if he didn't head above the gray fog for the time being. I clearly don't need any protection, but I spent a few £100 to hire 2 people to restrict my actions. How helpless I am as a tycoon. Klein finally sighed inwardly as he raised the cup of black tea that had just been prepared by Richardson. He took a sip as his facial muscles tensed up before relaxing. Klein looked down and discovered that there had been twice the number of lemon slices in his black tea than usual. He glanced at Richardson in an unnoticeable manner, and he saw that his valet was in a daze, as though he was still lost in the horror of the assault. As cowardly as usual. Klein commented inwardly as he placed the porcelain cup on the table. Late at night, 39 Birkeland Street, Member of Parliament Mac's house. Hazel sat before her dressing table, looking at the gray rat sitting on a powder box. After a long silence, she said, "Was my father wrong? The matter he pushed for is clearly a good thing. There is nothing that is beneficial to everyone. There will always be those who benefit and those who suffer from it. At such times, a relevant bill or plan requires thought, compensation, and aid. If your father had done them, the problem isn't his. Conversely, it also means he's cold and ruthless," the rat said perfunctorily. Hazel recalled for a few seconds and relaxed her expression. "During dinner, I sensed that there was something very valuable hidden inside the cupboard in the pantry, but when I later got an opportunity to open it, there was nothing." The rat was taken aback as it said in thought, perhaps that was Dwayne Dance's bodyguard. He was recently embroiled in a suicide case, and it said that it involves Baron Syndras. Hiring a bodyguard to protect him in secret is normal. The bodyguard inside the cupboard might also possess supernatural powers, carrying mystical items with them. That's why you were able to sense it. Hazel nodded gently and accepted the explanation before subconsciously muttering to herself, "I wonder what kinds of supernatural powers those bodyguards have." After saying that, she swept the gray rat with a puzzled look. "How do you know Dwayne Dance was embroiled in a troublesome case?" The rat squeaked. "My present state is very suitable for me to eavesdrop into the conversations of others." As it spoke, it looked in the direction of 160 Birkeland Street, the glint in its eyes shimmering. Based on the sleeping rotation, Fors was asleep as she felt herself float to an ancient and majestic castle. In it were all kinds of Beyonder ingredients and mystical items. There were even 2 blurry tarot cards. However, she didn't take any of them away, as they were sealed by an invisible force field. Fors looked around in an attempt to find the means to remove the seal. Finally, she saw a complicated symbol drawn at the top of the dome. It was a symbol formed from fate and concealment. "If I find an item engraved with this symbol, I'll be able to unseal some treasure." Fors immediately came to a realization when she snapped awake. She discovered that she had curled into a ball on the carpet in the room. She had a thin silk blanket covering her. She and Zio didn't dare sleep in the reclining chair, afraid that Dwayne Dance, who often sat in it, would notice something different. Rubbing the edges of her brows, Fors sat up and saw Zio having her back to the wall of the master bedroom. She was seriously listening for any stirrings. As Fors walked to Zio, she said with a frown, "I feel that there is some secret hidden here. I had a strange dream, dreaming of an exaggerated treasure trove and a complicated symbol." As an astrologer, she instinctively believed that there was a problem with her dream. Noticing the serious look on Fors' face, Zio suppressed her words of doubt and said after some thought, "Perhaps there really is some sort of secret. I once heard a proverb regarding the mysterious world. It goes, when a Beyonder element is discovered somewhere, there must be a second one." Ignoring the butler who we can't tell if he possesses Beyonder powers or not, that Miss Hazel is someone with a Beyonder element. Around her, or should I say, that this street likely has a second one. Fors nodded gently before laughing. "However, it has nothing to do with us. We will receive our remuneration tomorrow evening and terminate this bodyguard mission. We will leave this place. The most pitiful of all is Dwayne Dance. He's innocent and ordinary, but he ends up involved with troublesome matters and beyonder elements. Having said that, Fors looked and Zio and joked, quickly wish him that the goddess would watch over him. I'm a believer of the god of steam and machinery. I won't be able to do so. Zio seriously considered for 2 seconds before drawing a crimson moon on her chest, piously muttering, "May the goddess bless Mr. Dwayne Dance." Fors was snapped out of her reverie as she covered her mouth and yawned. "I'll head out to patrol the building. It's your turn to sleep after another 15 minutes. "All right," Zio was clearly more awake than Fors. Fors immediately headed for the door and pressed on the wall with her outstretched hand, arriving at the corridor. She was just about to walk to the staircase when she sensed that there was a slight stir coming from the room of Dwayne Dance's valet. Fors' eyes darted slightly as she cautiously headed over. She opened a tiny door in the wall and peeped in. She then saw Richardson jumping a crazy dance that had a tinge of mystery. A spirit dance? Doesn't this valet believe in the Evernight goddess? He's secretly worshipping death. Fors frowned as she watched Richardson finish his spirit dance, softly praying for death's protection to help him avoid all kinds of danger. After everything came to an end, Fors tusked and shook her head. She silently said to herself, "What a pitiful man, Mr. Dance.